Early 2025. A new year dawns in Washington, but the political climate is anything but calm. The campaign trail is buzzing with energy, and Donald Trump is back in the spotlight, reviving a familiar battle cry: a sweeping 25% tariff on nearly all Chinese imports. The crowd roars, sensing the return of a hardline stance on trade. But this time, Trump isn't just talking tough, he's getting specific. He calls out Apple by name, putting one of America's most iconic companies directly in the crosshairs. iPhones, iPads, MacBooks assembled in China are now at the center of the debate. These devices found in millions of American homes suddenly become symbols of a much larger struggle. Trump's message is clear. Apple and other American giants should bring manufacturing home or pay the price. The promise? More jobs for American workers and a revival of the country's industrial heartland. The goal is ambitious: revive U.S. factories, create American jobs, and use tariffs as powerful leverage. It's a vision that appeals to workers who feel left behind by globalization. In May, Trump doubled down, telling Tim Cook directly, "Move production or face tariffs." The conversation was tense, with both sides aware of the stakes. It was a public, personal challenge. Apple couldn't ignore it. The world's media took notice, and so did investors. For Trump, tariffs are more than just policy. They're a signature move to shake up global trade and push his America First agenda. He's betting that tough talk and bold action will force change. Targeting Apple, a symbol of American innovation but deeply reliant on China, was a calculated way to make headlines and send a message to both Wall Street and Beijing. The implication was clear: adapt or pay up. For Apple, the stakes were enormous: shift supply chains, absorb costs, or risk losing market share. This wasn't just about trade. It was about reshaping the rules for American business, and redefining what it means to be made in America. Trump's tariff threat was a high-stakes gambit, putting Apple at the center of a global economic showdown. The world's media dissected every move, and markets braced for impact. The world was watching. Would Apple bend to political pressure? Or would the U.S. economy feel the heat from a trade war with China? The stage was set for a dramatic clash between political power and corporate strategy, with the future of global trade hanging in the balance. So how did Tim Cook respond to the threat of tariffs on Apple products? His reaction was measured, but his message was pointed. Instead of outrage or defiance, Cook issued a warning, one aimed squarely at everyday Americans, not just politicians or business leaders. Cook's message was simple: a 25% tariff on Apple products wouldn't punish China. Instead, it would hit American wallets, making the devices people rely on every day more expensive. If these tariffs went into effect, the price tags on iPhones, MacBooks, and other Apple devices would jump overnight. For many families, that could mean putting off upgrades or settling for less. Apple, Cook explained, simply couldn't absorb such a massive cost increase. The reality is those extra costs would be passed directly to consumers at the checkout counter. He pointed out that Apple's global supply chain, especially its manufacturing base in China, helps keep prices competitive and allows the company to innovate at scale. Slapping a huge tax on imports, Cook argued, would mean higher prices in U.S. stores. It's not about corporate greed or profit margins, it's basic economics. This wasn't a new position for Cook. He's been consistent in his stance for years. Cook has long argued that tariffs don't just hurt big companies. They hurt American competitiveness and stifle the innovation that drives the tech industry forward. Higher costs for companies like Apple mean less money to invest in new technology, fewer jobs for American workers, and slower economic growth across the board. Cook's argument was clear and consistent. Tariffs are essentially a tax on American consumers, not a real solution to trade imbalances or global competition. He urged policymakers to look beyond the headlines and consider the real impact on families, students, and small businesses that depend on affordable technology for work, school, and daily life. The debate, Cook insisted, wasn't just about Apple's bottom line. It was about the rising cost of living for millions of Americans who rely on technology to stay connected and productive. Cook's calm, fact-based approach gave his warnings credibility. He didn't resort to scare tactics. He laid out the facts and let them speak for themselves. In the end, Cook wasn't just defending Apple. He was making the case for every American who buys a phone, a laptop, or any piece of modern technology. The message landed. Tariffs might sound tough on paper, but in reality, they come with a price tag that every consumer will feel. The battle lines were drawn. not just in boardrooms or government offices, but at the checkout counter, where the true cost of tariffs would be paid by ordinary Americans. While Cook spoke out, Apple was already moving behind the scenes. The company accelerated its long-term plan to diversify manufacturing beyond China, ramping up production in India and Vietnam. This wasn't just a reaction to Trump, it was smart risk management in a volatile world. Apple's government affairs team worked overtime in Washington, meeting lawmakers and making the case that tariffs would backfire. Their pitch tariffs hurt U.S. competitiveness, threaten jobs, and slow innovation. Meanwhile, Apple reassured investors and customers, emphasizing its financial strength and adaptability. Publicly and privately, Apple projected calm and control, determined to weather any political storm. The company's message: we're prepared, we're diversified, and we're not panicking. Apple's strategy was clear: minimize risk, keep innovating, and stay ahead of political headwinds. The tariff threat was serious, but Apple was already playing the long game. In a world of uncertainty, Apple's steady hand stood out. What would a 25% tariff actually mean for you? Analysts quickly calculated, iPhones could jump $100, $200 in price, with similar hikes for iPads and MacBooks. For families and students, that's a real financial hit, not just a minor inconvenience. Business groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned that tariffs on Chinese goods could cost American consumers over $10 billion a year. And it's not just electronics, tariffs could drive up prices on everyday items, fueling inflation across the board. The result? Your paycheck doesn't stretch as far, and the cost of living climbs. The tariff debate wasn't just about trade policy, it was about your bottom line. Suddenly global politics was hitting home in your shopping cart. Wall Street hates uncertainty, and Trump's tariff threats sent shockwaves through the markets. Apple's stock took a dive as investors worried about higher costs and falling sales. The S&P 500 lagged behind European markets, with analysts blaming trade tensions and unpredictable U.S. policy. Some global investors shifted money to Europe, seeing it as a safer bet. Ironically, America First rhetoric was pushing investment overseas. The threat of tariffs didn't just rattle Apple, it shook the entire U.S. market. Investors watched nervously, waiting to see if the trade war would escalate. The message was clear: political moves have real financial consequences. For Apple and the markets, the tariff talk was a roller coaster ride. In the end, uncertainty proved more damaging than any single policy. Economists and trade experts weren't buying the tariff hype. They pointed out that Apple's supply chain is a global web built over decades. Moving it isn't quick or cheap. Trump's claims of easy job creation and stable prices didn't add up, especially with automation reducing factory jobs. Critics called the plan nostalgic and unrealistic, arguing it misunderstood how modern manufacturing works. The consensus tariffs on Apple were a blunt tool for a complex problem. The world didn't take Trump's tariff threat lightly. Almost immediately, the announcement sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and financial markets alike, as leaders scrambled to respond. The EU and other major trading partners warned of swift retaliation, raising the specter of a global trade war that could spiral out of control and impact millions of jobs worldwide. China, the world's second-largest economy, was quick to signal it would hit back, targeting iconic American exports from soybeans to airplanes, and threatening to escalate the standoff. U.S. industry groups, retailers, tech companies, manufacturers, lobbied hard against the tariffs, warning of dire consequences for American competitiveness. Their fear was clear: higher costs, fewer sales, and job losses at home. Small businesses and workers stood to lose the most, as uncertainty rippled through the economy. Modern supply chains are intricate and global. Tariffs disrupt everything, driving up prices, causing delays, and forcing companies to rethink how and where they do business. The pushback was fierce, both abroad and at home. Protests erupted and business leaders voiced their concerns in public forums and private meetings. Industry leaders stressed that tariffs would hurt American businesses and consumers more than foreign competitors, warning of price hikes and shrinking markets. The message was clear: in a connected world, trade wars have no winners. Every country, every industry, and every worker is linked in the global economy. The threat of tariffs created chaos and uncertainty, not solutions. Markets tumbled, and investors braced for more volatility. The global economy is a delicate machine. One wrong move, and everyone feels it. Even a single policy shift can set off a chain reaction across continents. The backlash forced policymakers to reconsider, as pressure mounted from all sides to find a less destructive path forward. The world was united in warning, don't start a trade war you can't win. The stakes were higher than ever, and the message was impossible to ignore. By early summer, the tone in Washington shifted. Trump's team began framing tariffs as a last resort, not an immediate policy. The unified pushback from Apple, industry, and international partners had an effect. Apple's stock rebounded as fears of instant tariffs faded. Tim Cook's steady leadership was widely praised. He'd turned a crisis into a case study in corporate diplomacy. But Apple didn't relax. Supply chain diversification continued, with more investment in India and Vietnam. The lesson resilience isn't built overnight, and Apple was playing the long game. The crisis cooled, but the strategy stuck. Apple's global footprint was now more robust than ever. The tariff threat had changed the game even as the storm passed. The Trump-Apple tariff saga showed just how risky blunt trade policies can be in a globalized world. Even the threat of tariffs sparked economic anxiety, market turmoil, and fierce opposition. Tim Cook's response, public education, private lobbying, and strategic action, was a masterclass in crisis management. The episode highlighted the complexity of bringing manufacturing back to the US. It's not as simple as it sounds. Automation and global supply chains mean old-school factory jobs aren't coming back in droves. The real lesson in international trade, simple solutions rarely work. For companies like Apple, flexibility and foresight are key to surviving political storms. In the end, the story was a reminder: global business and national politics are forever entwined, and the stakes are higher than ever.